stories that are both a delight to read and to hear. Monsters I Know. Some monsters are scary and others are not. Don't be afraid to smile a lot. There's a lot to fear from giant monster lips. Don't get too close when it drools and spits. A cosmetic experiment that went very wrong. These giant red lips get very headstrong. It chases everyone for a great big smack, and no one wants to kiss it back. Never would anyone want to be kissed. Complain all you want, the lips will insist. It's not that the lips are just scary or even much bigger in size. It's the goo in your ears and the drool in your eyes. It's an enormous kiss that starts at your face and ends at your waist. It's like licks from that smelly dog next door and a whole lot more. There's nothing worse that I know. It smells like a wild buffalo if you compare it with other kisses you've had. Even the ones from your aunt weren't so bad. Thomas is clean, his clothes are all neat, but he has a messy friend you don't want to meet. In his room, in his bed, when he pulls the covers up over his head, something lives down there, down by his feet, wrapped up in the sheet. Thomas brings its string and colored thread. That's what it eats when it wants to be fed. Starting out as belly button lint, it's now much bigger and leaves giant footprints. It's not mean and doesn't complain, since it only has string for a brain. Sure, it groans and grimaces while growing bigger every day. It's my very best friend, Thomas would say. It's nothing imaginary. Not a pretend friend. It's not too ugly, bad-mannered, and won't usually offend. But when it wanders out on the streets at night, it often gives people a terrible fright. It only happens when I'm alone, Paul complained. My hair starts to groan, and I think it has a life of its own. His hair was unhappy. Got angry and mean, the nastiest hair you've ever seen. When Paul's hair was full grown, it was bigger than him, so Paul asked his barber about more than a trim. On the way to the barber shop that very same day, Paul's hair decided to just run away. It wandered the streets eating cookies and sweets, growing bigger with every candy bar it eats. It's out there still, walking around. By now, it could weigh nearly 500 pounds. It must be more than 10 feet tall, with one big eye, its bad temper and all. That's not what still troubles Paul. He's more worried about being so bald. Sam has a bit of a smell. There isn't much more to tell. He doesn't bathe every day, but that isn't the fault. His stomach gases are his worst assault. Whatever it is, it just happens too often and really smells awfully bad and rotten. It's worse than any skunk and more like a chunk of smelly, wet gunk. It's like an old fish, green cheese, or even doggy do. Whenever he's near, everyone just says, "Phew!" Even his new shoes smell bad, but nothing like his toes. For Sam, it was so awful, he had to cut off his own nose. It's more than any one can outrun. Sometimes two smells together are much worse than smelling one. No smells are exactly alike, and with Sam, they're hard to name. Sam may not be a monster, but he smells like one just the same. It lives on a farm and will hide behind the big red barn. The tree was mean and nasty, there wasn't any doubt. Everyone knew it after it started walking about. The horse was too tough for it to chew, so it ate the cow, laughed, and said, "Moo." Then it chased the pig and ate him too. While the farmer was sound asleep, the monster tree ate all 10 of his sheep. Almost all the chickens on the farm run very fast, except for one that's no longer last. The farmer's rooster was just too slow, and the tree didn't like the way that it crowed. The tree caught the duck and even wrecked the farmer's truck. It put 3 holes in the bottom of the farmer's boat. It stretched out branches and ate the goat. For his protection, the farmer says, "I need a drawbridge and really deep moat. That may not help. I'm sure that trees float." It's only in autumn when you should worry before the winter snows start to flurry. Be on your guard when raking backyards. When the autumn colors show on maple trees, it waits nearby inside piles of leaves. The only warning of this hungry dread is that one bright leaf on the top of its head. Even if you disbelieve, think twice before leaping into piles of leaves. It's waiting there like a big hungry beast, and you may be its very next feast. According to Gio Giannetti, it started out as a pot of spaghetti. His sister used the recipe wrong, and it was left on the stove for much too long. It made a sound like a gurgling and buzz. It just wasn't the same as Mama Giannetti does. Gio's sister didn't seem concerned until that moment her back was turned, when the spaghetti jumped out of the pot and squirmed down the hall, looking just like a big knot. It grew as it wiggled, much more than a little, and had one green eye in the middle. It went out the front door, down the stairs. It looked like a pile of gurgling angel pasta hairs. They weren't happy seeing their dinner wriggling up the street, but it's not a dinner they would still want to eat. That was the last Gio Giannetti saw of it, but the neighbors still complain. It comes back some nights chasing cats up and down their back lane. The whole town noticed the barber's pole every day. For 30 years it just turned outside the shop in the very same way. It kept on spinning around and around. It sometimes seemed to move up and down. It just kept turning. In the summer heat and the winter cold, people would stop just to stare at this twirling barbershop pole, until one day it completely went out of control. The pole started to crack. Something hatched out from inside. All the people were completely shocked and horrified. Now the barbershop is full of town gossip and news. From what people describe, it couldn't ever wear shoes. No one thought that anything lived in that town barber's pole. Now it's full grown and hides in the blackest of holes. Just outside town, it's now found living in a cave. No one ever goes there for haircuts or shaves. Little Susie Magoo bought 2 small goldfish. As far as she knew, Sue took them both home without knowing how to look after the 2. She fed them both with cans of beans and stew. She fed them cookies and candies too. Whatever she fed them, just one of them grew. The other one stayed the same. As the big one grew, it seemed awfully mean, and the other one seemed quiet and tame. When the big fish was only 7 days old, it no longer fit in Susie's fish bowl, so she put them both in a nearby pond for room to swim and play. Susie's cat went missing the very next day. The bigger fish changed overnight. How big that fish grew was an amazing sight. The tail was as big as a kite. Susie's very best friend just wanted to see. Now she's gone with a splash and a whee! The problem has stopped, but it's not what you think. It happened so fast, as quick as a blink. The real monster fish was the one very small. It gobbled up the bigger fish, tail and all. Billy didn't like lima beans or Brussels sprouts. His mother said he couldn't throw them out, so he filled his pockets while at the table and buried them out back when he was able. Maybe it was the dirt or the weather. Maybe They just shouldn't be buried together. Whatever the cause, whatever the reason, something strange grew the very next season. From that spot out back, something grew there that Billy called Jack. Jack was as big as a tree with curly bean branches and two big buck teeth. Jack had one big eye and a puckery mouth, just like any other Brussels sprout. Jack was a monster, there was no doubt. Butterflies and bees were the first things to go. Nothing else close to Jack will grow. No birds would ever fly close to Jack. To Jack each one was a flying snack. Dogs and cats won't come near. Billy made a sign that reads, "Don't stand here." Sit down if you dare, but there's something creepy about this old school chair. Just when you think it's safe to sit down, there's a monster chair with a mean-looking frown. It's more than a chair just to sit on. One moment you're there and the next you'll be gone. It's always ready to eat someone more. Run fast if you can, straight for the door. It gobbles up one or two kids just for lunch. For dinner it munches on a whole bunch. There's only one question that I'd like to know. It hasn't any stomach, so where do they all go? This monster trunk is never filled to the brim. My uncle looked in, and there's no more of him. If looking for stuff in this trunk, it might swallow you up in a quick clunk and plunk. Even when opened just a small crack, all you can see is lots of bottomless black. It belonged to a circus with elephants and clowns. There's no bottom to it, even when turned upside down. It was worse than anyone imagined or feared, when one night the whole circus completely disappeared. The crowds and the clowns can still be heard inside. If that big circus fits, never open it wide. Everyone knows not to talk with strangers. Some dead-end signs also warn us of dangers. There's an alley you need to walk past very fast. Between the palm reader and the bric-a-brac shop, from the bottom of the alley right up to the top, something frightening makes its home there in the dark. Pay more attention when your dog starts to bark. It's nothing you can easily see, except just in one corner there's a bit of messy debris. It's not just cardboard and much more than a box. Some people say that it sometimes talks. The alleyway is clean, with no grime or grit, not even just a little bit. Walking near to that alley gives it something to chew. It sits there waiting for someone tasty like you. At first, no one noticed it much. It made some odd noises, gurgling, bubbling and such. "That old fridge should be repaired. We really need a new one," Mrs. Jones declared. But Mr. Jones kept saying, "It's got plenty of life." We knew that was true when it ate up his wife. With gruesome sounds it crunched her bones, it gobbled her up. Poor Mrs. Jones! Mr. Jones tried to stop it by pulling out the plug. It just didn't stop, even still when unplugged. After that, it ate their new rug. It ate some tiles off the floor. They tasted good, so it ate some more. It ate the sink and kitchen door. It ate the table and all but one chair. It ate the cupboards, then walked down the stairs. It was hard to imagine how it could do all that. It ate their dog Matt, then ate their cat Pat. It was so rude, snarling and growling as it chewed. When it ate both the twins, Bobby and Simone, Mr. Jones said, "I probably should have listened to Mrs. Jones."